November 25th, 1944, 08:47 hours, South China Sea. Commander James "Jimmy" Sullivan stood in the conning tower of USS Swordfish, watching the horizon through his periscope. In 12 hours, his crew would be carving turkey 400 feet below the surface, while Japanese destroyers dropped depth charges overhead. None of them knew yet that this Thanksgiving dinner would last 72 hours, that the air would grow so thin men would hallucinate, or that Sullivan's decision to maintain absolute silence would save all 63 lives aboard. What happened in those 3 days beneath the South China Sea would redefine what submarine crews considered possible under pressure. James Sullivan grew up in Charlestown, Massachusetts, where his father operated a small fishing boat in Boston Harbor. By age 12, Sullivan could navigate fog banks that kept experienced captains in port. His mother died when he was 14, tuberculosis, and Sullivan found comfort in the rhythm of waves, the discipline of navigation, the silence of early morning departures. He enlisted in the Navy in 1936, age 22. Something about the quiet precision of submarine service appealed to him. Surface ships were loud, crowded, chaotic. Submarines demanded exactness. A single mistake 300 feet down meant death for everyone. Sullivan reported to USS Swordfish in Pearl Harbor, July 1943. The Submarine, a Gato-class boat commissioned in 1941, had already completed 4 war patrols. She was 311 feet long, displaced 1,526 tons, surfaced, carried 24 torpedoes, and a crew of 60 officers and enlisted men. Sullivan took command in October 1943, at age 29, younger than most submarine captains but already respected for an uncanny ability to read sonar patterns and predict enemy movements. By November 1944, Swordfish had completed 9 war patrols under Sullivan's command. They'd sunk 18 Japanese cargo ships, 2 destroyers, and damaged a light cruiser. The crew trusted Sullivan's instincts absolutely. When he said dive, they dove. When he said hold position, they held. They would need that trust during the next 72 hours. By late 1944, Japanese anti-submarine tactics had evolved dramatically from the war's early years. What started as disorganized depth charge attacks had become systematic hunter-killer operations. Japanese destroyers worked in coordinated groups, typically 3 to 5 ships, using sonar, radio direction finding, and oil slick tracking to locate and destroy American submarines. The statistics told the story. In 1942, American submarine loss rate in the Pacific averaged 8% per patrol. By November 1944, that rate had climbed to 22%. The Japanese were learning. Lieutenant Robert Hayes, Swordfish's executive officer, understood this better than most. November 18, 1944, 7 days before Thanksgiving, Hayes had served aboard USS Tang until September, when he transferred to Swordfish for family reasons. His wife was expecting their second child, and Tang was scheduled for extended refit that would keep Hayes away for months. Tang went down October 25, 1944, torpedoed by her own malfunctioning weapon in the Formosa Strait. 78 men died, 9 survived, picked up by a Japanese destroyer, spending the rest of the war in POW camps. Hayes learned about Tang's loss November 12th via radio message forwarded through ComSub PAC. He'd been in Swordfish's wardroom reviewing patrol orders. The message came through, decoded by the radio man, handed to Sullivan. Sullivan read it twice, then handed it to Hayes without comment. Hayes read the 3-line message, set it down carefully, walked to his quarters. 30 minutes later, he returned to the wardroom, face composed, voice steady. Request permission to review depth charge evasion procedures with the crew, Captain. Sullivan nodded. Granted. That review probably saved their lives. November 20th, 1944. Swordfish departed Fremantle, Australia, beginning her 10th war patrol. Orders: interdict Japanese supply lines between Singapore and Manila. Focus on cargo convoys supplying the Philippines, where MacArthur's forces were fighting the Battle of Leyte. Secondary objective: gather intelligence on Japanese naval movements in the South China Sea. The crew numbered 63, 9 officers, 54 enlisted. Average age, 24. Youngest: Seaman Robert Bobby Chen, 18, San Francisco, radio operator. Oldest: Chief Petty Officer Michael O'Brien, 42, Chicago, chief of the boat who'd served on submarines since 1923. November 24th, 0600 hours. Swordfish detected a Japanese convoy 140 miles east of Palawan Island, Philippines. Sullivan brought the submarine to periscope depth. Through the lens: 6 cargo ships, 3 escorts, 2 destroyers, 1 patrol boat. Relatively light protection. The convoy zigzagged at 8 knots, heading northwest toward Manila. Sullivan calculated approach vectors. The convoy would pass within torpedo range around 1400 hours. Perfect timing, daylight attack, good visibility for periscope observations, enough time to reload tubes and potentially engage multiple targets before diving deep and running silent. But November 25th was Thanksgiving. Sullivan had promised the crew a proper dinner: turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie. The Navy supplied submarines generously for morale purposes. Swordfish carried 12 frozen turkeys, 50 pounds of potatoes, crates of canned vegetables, and all the fixings for a traditional feast. "Mr. Hayes," Sullivan said quietly, "what do you think about hitting this convoy after dinner instead of before?" Hayes considered. Attacking after dark meant periscope observations would be limited, but also meant Japanese lookouts would have reduced visibility. The trade-off seemed acceptable. "Gives the boys something to look forward to, sir, and night attack reduces our visual profile." Sullivan nodded. "Inform the crew. Thanksgiving dinner at 1400 hours. We attack at 2000 hours." November 25th, 1944, Thanksgiving Day, 1400 hours. Chief O'Brien and his galley team had been preparing since 0600 hours. 12 turkeys roasted in shifts. Swordfish's galley could only handle 2 birds at a time. The smell permeated the submarine: roasting meat, baking bread, simmering gravy. For men who'd been eating canned rations and reconstituted eggs for weeks, the scent was intoxicating. The crew ate in shifts. Space in the mess hall limited seating to 12 men at a time. First shift, 1400 hours. Last shift, 1630 hours. Every man got real turkey, real stuffing, real cranberry sauce. Morale soared. Torpedo Man First Class Anthony Tony Marino, 26, Brooklyn, carved turkey with the precision of a surgeon. "Best damn Thanksgiving I ever had," he announced, stacking slices onto plates. "Better than my ma's, God rest her soul." Seaman Chen, monitoring the radio, ate his dinner at his station, standing orders for communications watch during meals. He'd never celebrated Thanksgiving before joining the Navy. His family celebrated Lunar New Year, Moon Festival, Qing Ming. This American holiday felt strange but welcome. The turkey tasted good. Sullivan ate in the wardroom with his officers. Hayes raised a cup of coffee. Alcohol was forbidden aboard submarines. "To absent friends," he said quietly, thinking of Tang. "Absent friends," the officers echoed. At 1745 hours, Chief O'Brien began cleaning the galley. Leftovers went into the refrigeration unit. Enough turkey and fixings for sandwiches the next day, assuming the attack went smoothly. At 1930 hours, Sullivan ordered battle stations. The crew moved to combat positions. Torpedo tubes flooded.
Firing solutions calculated.
The Japanese convoy had maintained course and speed, now 12 miles ahead, still zigzagging, still unaware of the American submarine tracking them. At 1955 hours, Sullivan raised the periscope for final observations.
Full darkness, clear sky, calm sea,
Perfect conditions. At 2003 hours, everything changed. Torpedo away! Sullivan fired 4 Mark 14 torpedoes in rapid succession, staggered timing, targeting the largest cargo ship in the convoy.
Standard practice.
Multiple torpedoes increased hit probability, compensated for the Mark 14's notorious reliability problems that had plagued American submarines throughout the war. The torpedoes ran hot, straight, and normal. 60 seconds.
90 seconds.
120 seconds. Boom! The explosion lit the night sky. 1 hit, possibly 2. Sullivan swung the periscope, tracking damage. The cargo ship, approximately 8,000 tons, listed heavily to starboard.
Secondary explosions suggested they'd hit ammunition or fuel stores.
"Reload forward tubes," Sullivan ordered. "Prepare for sonar, high-speed screws, bearing 270, range 3,000 yards and closing fast." Hayes checked the plot.
"That's not one of the escorts we tracked, Captain.
New contact." Sullivan's stomach tightened. Japanese destroyers often sailed in loose formations, spacing ships several miles apart to maximize sonar coverage.
They detected 1 destroyer accompanying the convoy.
Now a second had appeared. Worse, this destroyer was moving at flank speed, 30-plus knots, directly toward Swordfish's position. "Dive! Take her to 400 feet!
All ahead flank!"
The klaxon sounded. Men scrambled. The submarine's bow pitched downward. 400 feet was deep, approaching Swordfish's maximum rated depth of 450 feet. At that depth, water pressure exceeded 175 pounds per square inch.
Hull plates creaked,
Rivets groaned, but it put distance between the submarine and surface, made sonar tracking harder, gave them a chance. At 400 feet, Sullivan ordered, "All stop, rig for silent running." Silent running.
Every non-essential system shut down.
No ventilation, no air conditioning, no unnecessary movement. Men breathed slowly, conserving oxygen. The submarine transformed into a tomb, dark, quiet, still.
Sound carried through water with terrifying efficiency.
A dropped wrench could betray their position. A cough could mean death. Above them, Japanese destroyers began their hunt. 20:47 hours, 44 minutes after diving. Wham!
The first depth charge exploded 200 feet away, 100 feet above them.
The shock wave hit Swordfish like a freight train. Light bulbs shattered. Men grabbed handholds. The entire submarine rang like a bell.
Sullivan stood in the conning tower,
hands gripping the periscope housing, face expressionless.
"Damage report."
Reports came in from each compartment. Forward torpedo room, crew's quarters, officers' quarters, control room, engine room, maneuvering room, aft torpedo room.
Minor damage.
Light bulbs, cork insulation, loose equipment, but no hull breaches, no flooding, no casualties. Wham! 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 3 more depth charges, closer now, 150 feet away. The destroyer above was bracketing, dropping patterns designed to force the submarine toward the surface. Chief O'Brien moved through the submarine, checking seals, monitoring gauges, his 42 years of experience instantly recognizing which sounds meant danger and which meant tolerable stress. He paused at the galley. Thanksgiving leftovers sat in containers, neatly stacked. 12 servings of turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, the second shift's midnight snack now forgotten in the chaos of combat. O'Brien grabbed a container. Cold turkey. He took a piece, chewed slowly. The absurdity struck him. Eating Thanksgiving dinner while Japanese destroyers tried to kill them. He kept eating. 21:30 hours, November 25th. Swordfish had been submerged for 90 minutes.
Sullivan studied the sonar display.
2 destroyers now, possibly 3. They were running search patterns, expanding circles, listening for any sound that would betray the submarine's position. Hayes calculated oxygen levels. At 400 feet, with 63 men breathing, they had approximately 18 hours of breathable air before CO2 buildup became critical. That assumed minimal physical activity and use of CO2 scrubbers, chemical canisters that absorbed carbon dioxide from the air. "Captain," Hayes said quietly, "if we surface now, we can fight our way out. 2 destroyers, maybe 3.
We've got deck guns, could—"
"Negative," Sullivan interrupted. "Night surface action against 3 destroyers. They'd tear us apart before we cleared the hatch." Hayes knew Sullivan was right. Submarines were wolves, not bears. They hunted from stealth, struck from darkness, fled before the prey could counterattack. Surface combat against destroyers was suicide. "So we wait," Hayes said. "We wait." At 2300 hours, Chief O'Brien distributed the cold turkey. Men ate in silence, standing at their stations, chewing slowly. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Thanksgiving dinner, 400 feet underwater while the enemy tried to kill them. Seaman Chen took his turkey piece back to the radio room. He'd never tasted meat quite like this. Cold, slightly dry, but somehow the best thing he'd ever eaten. Later, he would tell his grandchildren about Thanksgiving, 1944, how he ate turkey while listening to Japanese destroyer propellers overhead, how the holiday became permanently associated with survival, gratitude, and the strange grace of being alive, when death waited yards away. At midnight, November 26th, the destroyers were still there. Silent running demanded absolute discipline. No drop tools, no loud conversations, no running water. Men communicated through hand signals and whispered words. Breathing slowed, movement minimized. The heat built steadily. Without ventilation, temperature inside the submarine climbed from a comfortable 72 degrees Fahrenheit to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, then 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Men stripped to their skivvies. Sweat pooled on metal surfaces. The air grew thick, oppressive. Hayes monitored CO2 levels obsessively. At 0400 hours, November 26th, CO2 concentration reached 2%, twice normal atmospheric levels, enough to cause drowsiness and headaches. He consulted with Sullivan. "We need to surface soon, Captain. Another 12 hours at this rate, we'll have men passing out." Sullivan checked the sonar. 3 destroyers still circling above. "Negative. We hold position." At 0600 hours, Sullivan ordered CO2 scrubbers activated. The chemical canisters absorbed carbon dioxide but generated heat as a byproduct. Temperature inside Swordfish climbed to 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Men began hallucinating. Torpedo man Marino saw his mother standing in the forward torpedo room, smiling, beckoning. He shook his head, blinked, and she vanished. Chief O'Brien heard his wife calling from the galley. Seaman Chen smelled his grandmother's cooking: dumplings, steamed fish, rice. Sullivan recognized the signs: hypoxia, CO2 poisoning, heat exhaustion. But surfacing meant death. The destroyers wouldn't miss a submarine breaking the surface at dawn. "Hold position," Sullivan ordered again. "All hands, conserve oxygen, minimal movement, slow breathing." The crew obeyed. Training overcame discomfort. Discipline conquered panic. This was competence under pressure. 63 men, barely breathing, sweat-soaked, hallucinating, maintaining absolute silence while Japanese destroyers methodically searched for them.
At 1200 hours, November 26th, 24 hours after their Thanksgiving feast, Chief O'Brien distributed more cold turkey. The absurdity had become routine. Men ate mechanically, no longer tasting the food, focused entirely on survival.
Hayes noticed something peculiar. The Thanksgiving meal had become a ritual, a psychological anchor.
Each time O'Brien handed out turkey,
Men seemed to relax slightly, as if the simple act of eating connected them to normalcy, to home, to a world beyond the steel hull and crushing pressure. "Keep distributing the turkey," Hayes told O'Brien quietly.
"Every 6 hours.
"Even if we run out, it's worth it." O'Brien understood. Morale mattered. In submarines, mental collapse preceded mechanical failure.
Keep the men focused.
Keep them believing they'll survive, and they'll endure conditions that would break ordinary sailors. At 1430 hours, a depth charge exploded directly overhead, closest yet. Swordfish bucked violently. Men crashed into bulkheads.
Equipment tore loose.
A seam in the forward torpedo room began weeping, not flooding, just moisture seeping through compressed seals. Torpedoman Marino grabbed a wrench, tightened the nearest valve.
His hands shook from exhaustion and CO2 poisoning, but his training held.
3 turns clockwise, the weeping stopped. Sullivan watched from the conning tower, expressionless.
Inside, he calculated probabilities.
How long could the hull withstand this pressure? How long could the crew maintain discipline? How long before someone panicked, made noise, betrayed their position?
At 1800 hours, November 26th,
30 hours submerged, temperature inside reached 107 degrees Fahrenheit. Men lay motionless, conserving energy, breathing shallow breaths. Some prayed, some slept fitfully, some simply stared at bulkheads, minds blank, waiting.
Chief O'Brien distributed more turkey at 1800 hours.
Men chewed slowly, mechanically. The ritual continued. At 0200 hours, November 27th, 40 hours submerged, Hayes reported critical CO2 levels. "We're at 4% concentration, Captain."
Men are becoming lethargic.
"Another 6 hours we'll start losing consciousness." Sullivan studied the sonar. 2 destroyers still present. The third had departed around midnight, probably refueling or responding to another contact. 2 destroyers.
Better odds than 3.
But still not good enough. "Hold position," Sullivan said again. At 0600 hours, battery levels reached critical. Swordfish ran on massive lead-acid batteries while submerged.
Those batteries powered motors,
Lights, sonar, and the CO2 scrubbers keeping everyone alive. At current consumption rate, batteries would die in approximately 8 hours. When batteries died, they lost life support. They lost propulsion. They became a steel coffin settling onto the ocean floor at 400 feet, where the pressure would eventually crack the hull and the South China Sea would flood in, drowning everyone in seconds. Hayes presented the math to Sullivan.
8 hours of battery life, 6 hours of breathable air.
"We have to surface soon, Captain." Sullivan knew Hayes was right, but surfacing at dawn, 0630 hours, meant silhouetting against the rising sun, giving Japanese destroyers a perfect target.
"We wait until 0900 hours,
Sullivan decided. "Sun will be higher, better visibility for us too." 3 more hours. Could the crew survive 3 more hours? They would have to. At 0700 hours, November 27th, men began passing out.
Seaman Chen collapsed at his radio station.
Chief O'Brien found him unconscious, dragged him to a cooler section of the submarine, poured water on his face. Chen revived, gasping. "Stay down," O'Brien ordered.
"Breathe slowly." At 0800 hours, torpedoman Marino hallucinated again. This time, His dead mother told him to open the hatch, that fresh air waited outside, that everything would be fine if he just climbed the ladder and opened the hatch. Marino stood, began walking toward the forward hatch. A shipmate grabbed him. "Tony, sit down. Gotta open the hatch. Mama says." "Your mama's dead, Tony. Sit down." Marino sat. The hallucination passed. He began crying silently. At 0830 hours, battery levels reached 15%, critical low. Hayes calculated. 30 minutes of life support remaining, maybe 45 if they shut down everything non-essential. Sullivan checked sonar one last time. One destroyer remained overhead. The second had moved off, probably searching a different sector. One destroyer, acceptable odds. "Surface!" Sullivan ordered. "Battle stations! Prepare deck guns!" The crew moved, sluggish from exhaustion and CO2 poisoning, but still functional. Training took over. Hatches prepared, guns manned, torpedoes loaded. At 0847 hours, November 27th, exactly 72 hours after diving, Swordfish broke the surface. The Japanese destroyer was 4,000 yards away, moving slowly, sonar sweeping. It detected Swordfish surfacing immediately. "Con! Sonar! Destroyer making turns for 30 knots, bearing 090. The destroyer swung toward them, guns training. Sullivan made a split-second decision. "Dive! Dive! Depth 200 feet. Swordfish crash-dived again, not to 400 feet this time, just to 200, shallow enough to maneuver, deep enough to avoid gunfire. As they submerged, Sullivan calculated firing solutions. The destroyer expected Swordfish to run. Instead, Sullivan turned toward the enemy. At 200 feet, Swordfish steadied. Sullivan tracked the destroyer through sonar, range closing, 3,000 yards, 2,500, 2,000. "Forward tubes ready, Captain," the fire control officer reported. At 1,800 yards, Sullivan fired 3 torpedoes. The destroyer detected the launches, turned hard to evade. But it was too close, moving too fast, and the Mark 14 torpedoes, despite their problems, ran true when fired at optimal range. 2 hits, massive explosions. The destroyer broke in half. Sullivan brought Swordfish to periscope depth. Through the lens, Japanese sailors in the water, oil fires burning, the destroyer's bow sinking rapidly. "Secure from battle stations," Sullivan ordered quietly. "Surface, let's get some air." Swordfish surfaced at 0903 hours. Hatches opened. Fresh air rushed in. Cool, clean, miraculous. Men stumbled onto the deck, gasping, weeping, laughing. Chief O'Brien emerged carrying the last container of Thanksgiving turkey. He raised it overhead. "To the best damn Thanksgiving I ever had!" The crew cheered, weak, hoarse, exhausted, but alive. November 27th, 1944, 1200 hours. Swordfish ran on the surface, batteries charging, crew recovering. Sullivan filed his patrol report via radio. Engaged enemy convoy November 25th, sank 1 cargo ship approximately 8,000 tons, evaded 3 destroyers for 72 hours submerged. Sank 1 destroyer November 27th. No friendly casualties. Request permission to continue patrol. ComSubPac's response came 4 hours later. "Well done, Swordfish. Return to base for refit. ComSubPac sends." The crew protested. They wanted to finish the patrol, wanted to make the Japanese pay for those 72 hours. But orders were orders. Swordfish arrived in Fremantle December 8, 1944. The submarine needed extensive repairs. Damaged seals, cracked welds, depleted CO2 scrubbers, exhausted batteries. The crew needed rest, but they'd survived. 63 men, 72 hours underwater, temperatures exceeding 107 degrees Fahrenheit, CO2 levels that should have killed them, battling hallucinations and heat exhaustion, maintaining absolute silence while Japanese destroyers hunted them. And they'd eaten cold Thanksgiving turkey through it all. Word of Swordfish's ordeal spread through the submarine fleet. Other captains studied Sullivan's tactics, how he'd maintained discipline, how he'd kept the crew focused through the turkey ritual, how he'd turned defense into offense, surfacing just long enough to attack before diving again. The technique wasn't officially adopted. Every submarine situation was unique, but elements appeared in other patrols. Captains emphasized crew discipline. They recognized that morale mattered as much as machinery. They understood that sometimes survival meant endurance, not action. Lieutenant Hayes, promoted to lieutenant commander, took command of USS Trumpetfish in March 1945. He survived the war, retired in 1960 as a captain, spent his final years telling anyone who'd listen about that Thanksgiving underwater, how cold turkey tasted better at 400 feet than any feast at the surface. Seaman Chen returned to San Francisco after the war. Every Thanksgiving until his death in 2003, he ate cold turkey, standing up, in absolute silence for exactly 5 minutes. His family thought it was eccentric. Chen never explained. Some memories belong to those who lived them. Chief O'Brien retired in 1946, opened a restaurant in Chicago. He never served turkey. When customers asked why, he'd smile and say, "Had my fill during the war." Torpedoman Marino went home to Brooklyn, married, raised 4 children. He never spoke about the war except once, at his grandson's Thanksgiving dinner in 1987. The family asked him to say grace. Marino stood, hands shaking, and said, "I'm thankful for air, for light, for silence, and for the men who shared turkey with me when we had nothing else." His family didn't understand. Marino sat down and never mentioned it again. Commander James Sullivan continued submarine service through 1945. Swordfish completed 2 more war patrols under his command, sinking 6 additional ships. Sullivan received the Navy Cross for the November 1944 patrol. The citation specifically mentioned the 72-hour evasion and the counterattack that sank the destroyer. He retired in 1962 as a rear admiral, died in 1998, age 84, in his sleep at his home in Annapolis. At his funeral, 23 surviving Swordfish crewmen attended. They brought cold turkey sandwiches, ate them standing, in silence, before the service began. Sullivan's widow asked what the turkey meant. The crewmen looked at each other. Chief O'Brien's son, O'Brien himself had died in 1973, explained, "It means they survived. It means they remember. It means Thanksgiving is more than a feast. It's gratitude for breath, for silence, for the men beside you when death hunts you in the dark." Swordfish never returned to combat. The submarine was decommissioned in 1946, scrapped in 1948, but her legacy lived on in the men who served aboard her, in the stories they told their children, in the tradition they established. Thanksgiving isn't about abundance. It's about gratitude for what you have, even when what you have is cold turkey, bad air, and the company of good men facing death together. Let the record show. 72 hours submerged, 63 men survived. 107 degrees Fahrenheit maximum temperature. 4% CO2 concentration. 8,000 tons. Cargo ship sunk. 1. Destroyer sunk. 0. American casualties. Let the record also show what the numbers can't capture. The taste of cold turkey. At 400 feet. The sound of silence when your life depends on it. The weight of responsibility when 63 lives rest on your decisions. The bond between men who face death together. the gratitude that comes from simply breathing. Every year, on the last Thursday of November, submarine veterans gather at the Naval Submarine Base in Groton, Connecticut. They eat cold turkey. They stand in silence for 72 seconds, 1 second for each hour Swordfish remains submerged. They don't explain the ritual to outsiders. They don't need to. Some things are understood only by those who live them. The terror of depth charges, the weight of water above, the trust required to remain silent when every instinct screams to move, to act, to do something, and the strange grace of celebrating Thanksgiving while Japanese destroyers hunt you, of finding gratitude in cold turkey and bad air, of learning that survival isn't about comfort, it's about discipline, trust, and the men beside you in the dark. If this story moved you, remember the men of USS Swordfish, who celebrated Thanksgiving 400 feet underwater, who turned a feast into a ritual of survival, who proved that gratitude doesn't require abundance, just breath and life and the determination to see another dawn.